Describe the arrival of the 10th Flieger Corps in Tripoli. In mid-February 1941 and its immediate impact on the North African skies. Explain why the British air power in North Africa was significantly reduced during the week of February 19, 1941. Detail the specific German losses reported during the air battle on February 19, 1941. What were the average monthly bomb tonnage and air alerts for Malta between January and May 1941? Document the sinking of the Italian merchant ship Silvia Tripkovich and the value of its lost cargo. Explain the naming of the Deutsches Aufklärungskorps and the conflicting theories regarding its origin. Summarize the career achievements of Rommel that led to his high standing with Hitler prior to the North African campaign. List the units and equipment that arrived in Tripoli on February 25, 1941, as part of the 5 ship groups. Describe the first direct ground clash between German and British troops at El Agheila on February 24, 1941. How did the British Cyrenaica Command view the threat of a German advance in late February 1941? What was the significance of the port of Benghazi in the context of the 10th Flieger Corps raids? Detail the night raid on Tripoli by the 70 Squadron's Vickers-Wellingtons on February 24. Who was Patrick Boats and what was his role in the army mentioned by the narrator? Identify the specific Italian light cruisers sunk by HMS Upright and the number of casualties involved. What was the role of the 1st King's Dragoon Guards in the days leading up to the El Agheila ambush? Analyze the Greek distraction and how it compromised British defensive capabilities and critique General Sir Henry Wilson's plan to defend Benghazi by pivoting on the escarpment. Evaluate the effectiveness of decryption and intelligence in the transition from Operation Compass to the arrival of the DAC. How did the presence of German 88s in the 33rd Flak Regiment change the tactical equation for British Matilda II tanks? Discuss Rommel's decision to use offensive defense despite receiving more hesitant orders from Berlin. Why was the sinking of the Armando Diaz considered a tactical success but a missed opportunity for the Royal Navy? Analyze the logistics of Operation Sunflower. Why were medical gear and workshops prioritized in the arrivals of February 25th? Assess the vulnerability of supply convoys like the Marburg convoy in the Mediterranean during February 1941. Explain the concept of pivoting on a flank in the context of desert warfare. Geography. How did the German air priority over supply routes affect British reinforcement efforts near El Agheila? Compare the air superiority strategies of the 10th Flieger Corps versus the local British RAF. Why did the British command rely on wishful thinking regarding German intentions in Tripolitania? Discuss the strategic impact of losing M1340 tank replacements at sea for the Italian forces. Evaluate the role of Malta as an unsinkable aircraft carrier based on the raid statistics provided. Analyze the risks taken by German dive bomber pilots during attacks on supply columns. Describe the mechanical function and psychological impact of the Stukas, Jericho, trumpets. Compare the maneuverability and firepower of a Hurricane VSA. Explain the dive bombing sequence of a Ru-87, angle, speed, and pull-out G-force. What were the technical specifications of the Italian M1340th tanks mentioned in the Silvia Tripkovich sinking? Detail the weaponry and speed advantages of the U-class British submarine, HMS Upright. How did a Kuba wagon differ from the dummy tanks Rommel mounted on them? Describe the role of Junkers 88s and Heinkel 111s. As long-range bombers in Sicily, what were the Marmon Harrington armored cars and how were they outclassed in the Feb. 24 ambush? Explain the operation of a Stukas dive brakes during its 80-degree descent. Discuss the capabilities of the German 88mm flak guns when used in an anti-tank role in the desert. What is a gravity tank in a hurricane and why was it a vulnerability during the February 19th air fight? Describe the composition of the 33rd Flak Regiment and its batteries arriving in Tripoli. Detail the tonnage and crew capacity of the Alberto de Jusino-class cruiser. Armando Diaz. How did Vickers-Wellingtons navigate and drop bombs during night raids in 1941? What was the function of a signals battalion, like Battalion 39 and a motorized division? Write a first-hand account of Flight Lieutenant Jacques Perrin's emergency landing in the Libyan sand. Imagine the perspective of a Stuka pilot diving through heavy anti-aircraft fire over a village south of Benghazi. Describe the atmosphere inside. Hums upright during the 45 minutes of depth charge attacks on February 25th. Reflect on the morale of Italian sailors on the Armando Diaz moments before the torpedo strike. Write a diary entry from a British soldier in the King's Dragoon. Guards who survived the El Agheila ambush. Describe the scene at the Tripoli port as 7,000+ German troops disembarked on February 25th. How would an Italian tank crew feel knowing their M1340th replacements were at the bottom of the sea? Imagine Rommel's thoughts as he inspected the dummy Volkswagen tanks for the first time. Describe the tension in a British airfield in Malta during one of the 92 monthly air alerts. What was the wishful thinking experience like for a British intelligence officer at Cyrenaica Command? Write the report of an Australian hurricane pilot encountering Mi-110s for the first time in Africa. Narrate the night raid on Tripoli from the view of an Italian anti-aircraft gunner. Describe the reaction in Berlin. VS the Berghoff. Upon hearing of the first ground victory in Libya, imagine the conversation between General Wilson and General Niem regarding the unlikely German offensive. How did civilians in Benghazi feel as the 10th Flieger Corps began regular raids? Rewrite the El Agheila ambush as a short cinematic screenplay focused on Lieutenant Williams. Create a recruitment poster for the newly named Deutsches Afrikakorps, using themes from the 1941 context. Draft a letter from Rommel to his wife explaining the change in his unit's official name. Simulate a post-war interview with Indy Neidell discussing the side theater mentality of early North African design. A tactical map layout for a war game representing the El Agheila abandoned fort ambush. Write a poem titled Jericho's Trumpet about the psychological terror of the Stukas. Create a what-if scenario where the British did not divert their forces to Greece in February 1941. Draft a radio broadcast from Malta intended to boost morale during the 1941 bombing campaign. Write a technical manual entry for the dummy tank conversion of a Kuba wagon. Create a fictional intelligence report intercepted from the IT below German Santa Maria column. Narrate a suspenseful scene of HMS Upright scanning for the Armando Diaz through a periscope. Write a speech by Rommel addressing his men upon the official adoption of the Afrika Corps name. Create a comic strip draft showing the Australian hurricane pilots shock at the 3-110s on his tail. Single quotes. Compose a song lyric about the sea of sand and the first shots fired on African soil. Draft a fictional memo from Downing Street insisting on the Greek priority over North Africa. Describe a late-night debate in a Tripoli command center about Rommel's aggressive reconnaissance. Write a legacy summary. How did the events of this single week shape the next 2 years of Desert War?